I'm Mike Ward. Welcome to the American Cannabis Summit, Countdown to Legalization. Today, we're going to make history. During this exclusive event, you will be taken deep inside our nation's most controversial, most misunderstood, and what's quickly becoming our most lucrative industry. We stand at the forefront of an unstoppable economic revolution. It's a new gold rush, a green gold rush, and it's just getting started. No longer is tobacco America's cash crop. With each day that passes, more farmers are becoming millionaires from growing cannabis. Bold entrepreneurs are opening dispensaries from coast to coast. The lines to get in are stretched around the corner, and most of their new customers are senior citizens. Cannabis tourism has become the latest craze in travel. People are now skipping Napa Valley wine tours, choosing instead to embark on weed tours in Colorado and Oregon. Doctors at leading institutes are harnessing the plant's medicinal power. They believe miraculous treatments for chronic pain, insomnia, depression, and countless other conditions are within our reach. And the most brilliant minds at universities like MIT and Stanford are developing cutting-edge technologies to bring cannabis to the masses. Imagine pushing a button on your cell phone and 6 cannabis plants begin to grow discreetly in a small corner of your home. This device automatically dispenses nutrients, optimizes the lighting, and even notifies you when it's time to harvest. Well, you don't have to imagine because that technology already exists. It seems everywhere you look, people are making a fortune from cannabis. Some invested in tiny marijuana stocks and watched as their holdings soared virtually overnight. Others backed little-known startups long before they IPO'd. Today in the United States, cannabis is a $10.8 billion industry. But what does the future hold? Could America's new cash crop become a $100 billion, maybe even a $1 trillion industry? Well, you're about to find out. If you want to learn more about the cannabis industry, if you're seeking a way to break into this lucrative market, or if you've been biding your time waiting for the right moment, then pay very close attention to everything you're about to hear, because America's green gold rush is just getting started. As we speak, big investment firms and members of the Fortune 500 are building enormous war chests. They're preparing to push billions upon billions of dollars into this market, and they could strike at any moment. So right here, right now, you have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to beat them to the punch and stake your claim. Your reward could be the kind of wealth that lasts for generations. Now with me now are 2 leaders of America's cannabis revolution. Former Speaker of the House John Boehner and Danny Brody, an executive behind 2 of the largest cannabis IPOs in history, including the largest. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be working with you, Mike.
I'm excited to be on the team.
We've got a lot of folks watching this now. This event is the first of its kind ever. It's garnered quite a bit of buzz in the media. We're still tallying the final numbers, but we're projecting that millions of people will be in attendance, watching from their homes and offices. Our inboxes have been flooded with questions. Everyone wants to understand this industry. John, we're a short walk from the Capitol building, your old office. You've been hearing from your friends that big changes are coming. And frankly, you're leading the charge, exerting your influence to push these changes through. Now, you've identified 3 events. They're approaching fast. Each will transform the cannabis industry forever. You're going to reveal them, and more importantly, you're going to make a major announcement. Now, outside this room, nobody has heard what you're about to say. But tomorrow, it could be on the front page of every newspaper from coast to coast.
And we may turn a few heads.
Danny, cannabis stocks have been popping up on exchanges for few years now, and what a wild ride it's been. One day some are trading for pennies or fractions of a penny a share, then out of the blue they shoot up thousands, even tens of thousands of percent, only to come crashing down to earth just as fast. Now all that volatility and risk has a lot of folks passing up these lucrative opportunities. On the other hand, the cannabis firms you've taken public are now worth over $1.6 billion. So we're going to talk about how to separate the winners from the wannabes. We've even identified 3 companies our viewers should consider targeting right now. Plus, we have an entirely different opportunity to discuss: how to become a successful angel investor in privately held cannabis startups. So let's jump right in. Now, John, most folks are familiar with your story. You were born in Cincinnati, Ohio. You grew up in a working-class family in a 2-bedroom house with 11 brothers and sisters.
We all shared one bathroom.
You certainly didn't let your humble beginnings hold you back. In 1990, you were elected to Congress as a representative for Ohio's 8th District. You were a member of the Gang of 7, which exposed the House banking scandal. And in 1994, you helped craft the Contract with America, In 2011, you became Speaker of the House. And while you were in office, you were one of the staunchest opponents of cannabis. You said you were unalterably opposed to legalization. But then, in the spring of 2018, you shocked a lot of people on Capitol Hill. You joined the board of Acreage Holdings, one of the largest cannabis firms in America. So let's address the elephant in the room. How the heck did you have such a dramatic change of heart?
Well, Mike, that soundbite about being unalterably opposed to cannabis is almost a decade old. Back then, like a lot of folks, I was getting faulty information. And one of the turning points for me was when I met this Navy SEAL. Honorably served our country for 20 years. He suffered horrible concussions, and more concussions. And after he got out, he kept getting serious migraines. He couldn't see straight. He couldn't think straight. The VA prescribed him all these hardcore drugs. And he tells me, I don't want all these drugs. I've got a wife and kids, and I want to be a father. So he refused to take his medication. He was just suffering. Then he tries cannabis, and the migraines vanished. I started hearing a lot of stories like this. Vets using cannabis to treat their PTSD, depression, chronic pain. It was helping them. So I started researching the industry. Do you know cannabis was a major part of early America? Our founding fathers, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, both grew it on their farms. Take a look at this, Mike. You get a kick at it. This is a $10 bill from 1914. And if the cameras could zoom in on this, you have President Andrew Jackson on the front. Back then, he was on our $10 bills. But if you flip this over, what do you see? Those are American farmers harvesting cannabis. Cannabis was such an important cash crop, it made it onto our money. Then you start digging into the medical uses. It's astounding. Back in 1909, a leading American medical journal recognized cannabis as a potential cure for asthma and tuberculosis. Go back even further, 4,000 years ago, biblical times, that's when people started using cannabis as medicine. So I realized I was wrong. And let me tell you, I've been having more and more meetings with my friends and colleagues on the Hill about this. Some of the most conservative politicians around. And their views are evolving on cannabis too, just like the American people. This is a big phenomenon. Cannabis is here to stay, and this industry is only getting bigger. When I was presented with an opportunity to join Acreage Holdings, I jumped at it. We're a fully integrated cannabis firm with dispensaries, cultivation, and processing operations in 14 states, with 3 deals pending to take us to 17 states. We're a major player, and we're only getting bigger.
Now, you're all in on cannabis.
Yes, I'm all in. This is the time to go all in on cannabis.
And Danny, you are an architect behind 2 of the largest cannabis IPOs in history. The first, Emblem Corporation, you took public in December of 2016. They're a large producer of medical-grade cannabis. And then in May of 2018, you took the Green Organic Dutchman public. It was immediately hailed as the largest cannabis IPO ever. Now your team is using this capital to build in Ontario, Quebec, and Jamaica. Today, these companies are worth about $1.6 billion. And it's worth mentioning, they are both Canadian firms. Canada just put an end to their prohibition. Like here in America, we've already seen a bunch of cannabis firms shoot up on their stock market.
Right, which is really incredible when you think about it. Canada, the entire country, has fewer people living in it than the entire state of California. And get this, the rosiest projections have the country's cannabis market hitting $9 billion by 2025. In the United States, this industry is already north of $10 billion annually. And we're still at the very earliest stages of this economic boom. The US is where all of the action is going to be for a while.
Danny, things have been moving very fast. New developments, rumors, and deals are being announced around the clock. Why don't you quickly take our viewers through the current state of the cannabis industry in America?
Sure thing. Let's put up the map. You'll see here we have 33 states where medical cannabis is legal. You can also add Guam and Puerto Rico. Okay, can we change the map? Now, we have only 10 states highlighted, including some big ones like California and Colorado. This is where both medical and recreational cannabis is legal. You can put up Washington, D.C. up on the board too. So we've got a long way to go to reach full legalization. That hasn't stopped this industry from experiencing explosive growth though. Revenue has quadrupled between 2014 and today, hitting $10.8 billion. Let's talk about jobs. Right now, cannabis businesses employ 200,000 Americans. That trend is not going to slow down either. Forbes is reporting that by 2020, we could have more cannabis jobs in the U.S. than manufacturing jobs.
Danny, you hit the nail on the head. When I'm talking to politicians, cannabis jobs are a major selling point. But so is the tax revenue. Colorado, perfect example. Since 2014, they've collected in the neighborhood of $815 million in tax revenue from cannabis. That's not $815 million in sales. They're ringing up billions there. That's $815 million in just tax revenue. Colorado poured that money into infrastructure projects, plugging holes in budgets, healthcare. Heck, $21 million was handed to law enforcement. The police are using cannabis tax dollars to keep the streets safe. And the biggest chunk of this cash, $200 million, has gone toward building new schools. Out in Deer Trail, Colorado, there was an elementary school that was falling apart. Sewage leak in the locker room, swimming pool wasn't safe, school doors wouldn't lock, no wheelchair ramps. Disabled kids had to be carried up the stairs. Thanks to all of those cannabis tax dollars, Deer Trail got a new elementary school.
If cannabis is already a $10 billion industry in America, it's creating all of these jobs and tax revenue, yet we're still at the very beginning of this boom. How big could it get?
Look, this rapid growth is happening while cannabis is still quasi-legal. The federal government is holding the industry back in a serious way. But even if nothing changes, our guys are projecting it will reach a $50 billion mark within 5 years.
What if something big does change? What if the federal government legalizes cannabis? The prohibition is done.
It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's inevitable. Voters want it. Economic benefits are too big to ignore. Now, I gotta choose my words carefully. What I'm hearing behind closed doors is pretty sensitive. Let me just say this. I have a strong suspicion we won't be waiting 5 years to see the federal government legalize cannabis. When that happens, whenever that happens, our guys are saying the industry will double practically overnight.
$100 billion just in the United States.
$100 billion. Like I said, practically overnight. Long term, the numbers are off the charts. Those 200,000 jobs that Danny just mentioned. With full legalization, that number could hit 1.1 million jobs. And $100 billion in revenue, we might just blow past that.
Globally, this could become a $1 trillion industry, simply because it affects so many others. The pharmaceutical industry is good for another $1.1 trillion. Alcohol, $1.3 trillion. Food and agribusiness is already a $5 trillion industry. When we get full legalization, you are going to see the floodgates open in these industries and so many more.
You both believe the federal government is going to end this prohibition and legalize cannabis. That hasn't happened yet. Talk about the ongoing challenges this presents to the industry.
Well, there are three big ones, starting with cannabis being classified as a Schedule I drug. But let me push back on calling these challenges. I think these were enormous opportunities. You have the ability to get on the ground floor of the biggest economic phenomenon of our lifetime, before it really takes off.
For folks who are familiar with the term, when you say cannabis is a Schedule I drug, what exactly does that mean?
The FDA slaps a label on every drug from a bottle of aspirin to the illegal stuff. They're each classified somewhere between a Schedule I and Schedule V. Schedule I is for the most dangerous and addictive drugs. 5, the safest. And look at this. They have cannabis as a Schedule I drug right next to heroin and LSD. Jump down to Schedule II and you'll find cocaine and meth, along with prescription drugs like Adderall and Vicodin.
I don't care how you feel about cannabis. Nobody in their right mind thinks it's more dangerous than cocaine or meth. I mean, anabolic steroids are a Schedule III drug, yet somehow cannabis is grouped with heroin and ecstasy?
There's no rational explanation for this. According to the DEA, Schedule I drugs are highly addictive and have no medical benefits. Cannabis is not highly addictive. And there have been more than 23,000 scientific papers released on the potential medical applications. Alzheimer's, cancer, epilepsy, post-traumatic stress disorder, autoimmune diseases, and the list goes on and on. Our guys estimate that about 80% of all cannabis use is medical. Every single day since I've become involved in this industry, I've had people tell me it's helping them. I was just in the Fort Myers airport, and this older gentleman stops me and says, "John, I want to thank you for your position on this issue. I'm 85 years old, I've got really bad arthritis, and if it weren't for cannabis, I couldn't function."
People spend a lot of money treating their arthritis. Now, chronic pain is a $77 billion industry. Cannabis only needs to capture a tiny fraction of that market to have an enormous impact. Same goes for sleep-related issues like insomnia. We've got somewhere between 50 and 70 million Americans dealing with this.
You walk into your doctor's office and say, "Hey, doc, I can't sleep." What will your doctor prescribe for you?
I don't know, Ambien, maybe Lunesta?
Exactly. Those drugs, Ambien especially, can have some pretty nasty side effects. Some folks will take them, go on a joyride, wake up in a cornfield in the middle of nowhere, and they can't remember a damn thing.
Pharmaceutical companies are on track to make about $102 billion a year selling dangerous sleep drugs. That presents a massive opportunity. A $102 billion opportunity for cannabis. Treating Crohn's disease is also worth paying attention to. There was a study in Israel where 90% of patients saw significant improvement after using cannabis. Nearly half went into complete remission. We can add another $7.6 billion opportunity for cannabis therapies right there.
Another place cannabis can make a difference is with epilepsy, childhood epilepsy in particular. Now go on YouTube and you'll see parents posting before and after videos of their kids. Kids who used to be struck by 50 seizures a day. Now they're experiencing 0. All because of special cannabis therapies. Check this out. Here's a brain scan of a little girl who was lived with non-stop epileptic seizures. This is before she underwent cannabis therapy. Here's what it looked like after. It's amazing.
Scientists have engineered these treatments so they don't contain THC. Now, THC is what makes someone feel high from cannabis, and the FDA has already approved one cannabis treatment for epilepsy. In fact, they even made a special exception and dropped the specific drug down to a Schedule 5, so it's right next to Robitussin. The firm behind this drug, GW Pharmaceuticals, they've shot up over 1,800%. Now, they're worth about $4 billion.
You know, epilepsy is very expensive to treat. People were spending about $10.4 billion a year. But there's some good news. Recent studies suggest costs are going to be cut in half, down to about $5 billion, due in large part to the potential of cannabis treatments. This could lessen the financial burden for those with epilepsy, while still creating a $5 billion revenue stream. That's a win-win in my book. And there are many pharmaceutical companies working on even more